All right, it is championship week here at the Dr. Jimbo Love Show. I'm here with Seth Bachman, right?
Bossman.
Bossman, but he goes by Seth Matthew as his radio name. Now I just gave it away. So now they're going to start stalking you, and all these people are going to be coming and looking for you. We are at Brothers Bar and Grill here at the shops at Northfield, and we're excited. We've got a game underway already. We've got Baylor playing against Oklahoma State. It's a little bitter pill for Seth to swallow because he would love to have seen his OU in the game and seen a repeat of Bedlam. Let's talk a little bit about last week. We had the Ohio State-Michigan game. Ended up being 42-27. Michigan just handled them.
Did we get it wrong? Did we both get it wrong?
I think we did. We both said that we were looking for Ohio State to win pretty handily, and Harbaugh and his boys pulled off really a game. It's really almost a game that's just the Fast and the Furious crew is here today. But anyways, it was a game that basically is a statement game for Harbaugh's coaching career, and it was the first time in 10 years that Michigan was able to beat Ohio State.
Yeah, I honestly can't remember the last time Michigan really won, and they've always been known for blowing big games. I think we really got on the C.J. Stroud bandwagon, but, this is why college football is the best game to watch. I mean, you have a young quarterback and a freshman, and no matter how well they play, you never know when they're going to crap the bed at the end of the day. And you know what? Ohio State got outplayed defensively, offensively. It was a crazy game to watch. Ohio State looked like they were going to hang in there for a little bit, but, Michigan put them away at the end. Good for them. And they earned themselves a chance in the Big Ten championship game, which will go on later in the show.
Yep, we'll talk a little bit more about that. The crowd, seeing 100,000 people, 110,000, or however many people were there at the Big House rushing the field was really, it was great TV, and it was really great for college football. OU versus Oklahoma State. I know this is a stinging kind of game for Seth. 37-33, Oklahoma State ended up pulling it out. What were your impressions of that game?
I was surprised by it. I know Oklahoma has struggled with offense throughout the year, especially on the defensive side of the ball as well. But they've always kind of hung in games, which they hung in here. Oklahoma State has not impressed me really all year. But you know what? Oklahoma State, they got the edge. They earned themselves it. OU's going back next year to go back to the drawing board. We'll go into some of the changes that they got on the last week. But, good for Oklahoma State. They're in the game right now with Baylor, down right now. Wish them the best. OU, you got to rebuild. We got to get back.
Absolutely. It'll be interesting to see what happens. We're going to talk a little bit more about that game with Baylor that's going on right now. It's 7-3. Looks like it's going to be an interesting game. It's going to go back and forth. Bama versus Auburn, we saw something that we're not used to seeing, and that was Alabama really having to put a drive together to save their season. Auburn, it was 24-22, an overtime game, and as I was saying last week, records just don't matter in rivalry week. These two teams are probably worlds apart as far as records go, but boy, I'll tell you, when you put two in-state rivals together, you never know what's going to happen.
Well, I feel bad for Auburn. You're already on a backup. It was not Bo Nix.
Yep,
I'm always wrong on Bo Nix, so thank God he was not in. But that quarterback played well. The defense played well, held Alabama in check. I think Alabama might have been looking to this week's game against Georgia more than they were thinking about Auburn. But, Auburn's quarterback was a little hobbled. It took a miracle play by Nick Saban. Hats off to Auburn for even hanging in this game.
Exactly.
But yeah, Bama ended up squeaking out. It was exciting football. Low-scoring games, I will never usually say that. It turned out like in the 20s. I believe it was like 24-22 in overtime. But the actual score of this game, I believe, was like 10-10 because that's what it was going into overtime. So, the whole game, super exciting. There were defensive plays made on both sides of the ball. It looked like Auburn had it. It was so funny when they were shooting all the fans at Auburn. They thought they had it won, and then it was funny at the end of the game when they went back to those same fans crying. It's unfortunate. We're all diehard fans when it comes to sports, and I can feel their pain. But yeah, good for Alabama to make it through that game.
Yeah, Charles Barkley was crying. I think he cried himself to sleep. He's a huge Auburn fan. Like, of course, graduated there from 1985. Carolina versus Clemson. It turned out pretty much what I kind of said. It was 30-0. I mean, South Carolina did nothing offensively. They looked horrible. Clemson just rolled them. And as you can see, this Clemson team is gaining momentum for next season. And really what I could see was just a difference in coaching staffs. You've got a Clemson team that's got a coaching staff with Dabo Swinney. And you've got Carolina with a brand new coaching squad. And it was just evident on the field. And what were your impressions? Did you have any impressions of Clemson? Did you see any of that game?
Well, I'm jealous of Clemson because this is your rebuilding year and you're only going to have 3 losses. What kind of pain did you actually go through this year? Like, that's just crazy. That kind of puts you on the Bama thing. A Bama on a 2-loss season is a terrible season for them. But Clemson, really, I mean, losing Trevor Lawrence, this quarterback that they have now, he got to play a couple times last year. He showed that he could carry it. Minus a couple losses here, this Clemson team is going to be a force to reckon with next year.
I believe so, too.
And I believe that whoever they get put up, unless it's something crazy, where somebody like a Cincinnati doesn't make the top 4, I think Clemson's going to win whatever bowl game they get because they look that good right now.
Yeah, they're going to get a January 1st bowl for sure. We just have to wait and see where the cards fall and see where the chips fall and with the cards we play. Wisconsin versus Minnesota Golden Gophers.
Schema.
Seth is excited. This was the highlight probably of your last week, wasn't it?
Yeah.
Because of Oklahoma losing.
There's so many good things going on in Minnesota. I mean, we never look for a championship. We look to make a bowl game. But losing our star running back, then losing our backup running back, and going with the third-string running back. Now, a lot of people are like, well, don't you have a quarterback and wide receiver? We're a predominantly running team. So it was a very interesting season, and we were there till the end to go to the Big Ten Championship. We fell a little short, but good news for us next year is the star running back that was going to be top 5 or 6 going to the NFL draft at running back has decided to opt out of the NFL draft and come back to Minnesota.
Wonderful.
And so
PJ
Fleck is really just doing a great job there. I can't say enough about him. And you know what? We have high hopes for next year, and we'll see how this goes.
I mean, to beat a Wisconsin team, and again, Wisconsin was a 3-loss team when you guys beat them. I mean, and I thought they were the best 3-loss team in the country.
I would agree. I thought they were amazing. They blew out Iowa.
Yep.
And they have, minus a couple losses they have early in the season, they've really handled all of their opponents really well. And Wisconsin's always that good team in the Big Ten that they never make it to the top 4, but they're always there to be that upset special. And this year, Minnesota, 2 years in a row, have beaten Wisconsin.
Right. Well, excellent. This brings us to a little bit of the coaching changes, portals, and Lincoln Riley, of course, departed from OU and is going to University of Southern California, USC. And Brian Kelly left Notre Dame after leading the number of wins by a coach at Notre Dame history, had no intention of leaving, or said he had no intention of leaving, and the next thing we know, he's at LSU. Tell us a little bit about your feelings about Lincoln Riley and OU.
So Lincoln Riley, I actually am more upset about this one, not because it's Oklahoma over the Brian Kelly thing, but Lincoln Riley is a fairly new coach. Oklahoma has a long tradition of coaches that have stayed a while. I mean, he had Stoops before, great Hall of Fame coach. Good news for them, Stoops has agreed to coach the bowl game. So,
I think that's really unheard of. Have you ever heard of a situation where a coach out of retirement comes back? Maybe it happened at BYU or something like that, but it's very rare.
Yeah, it's very rare, and I think it speaks volumes of the program. It goes to being Oklahoma. And you know what? He didn't take it well either about Lincoln Riley leaving. He even said, because we've lost a lot of players through the transfer portal all of a sudden. A lot of them that have committed to OU are uncommitting and going to USC to go with Lincoln Riley. And I get your whole system thing, but what Stoops said was, if you were coming for a coach, you weren't Oklahoma material. Because we go here for tradition, we go here for the program, and Oklahoma will be good again. Now, talking to some other Oklahoma fans right now, they agree, next year they're going to be okay. They're not going to be terrible. Top 4, maybe not. But the big thing is they understand there's going to be a rebuild. They expect, we're thinking maybe a minimum of 2 500 seasons, and then they're going to go right back to the top. So you know what? It's a growing pain. It's unfortunate. I think if Lincoln just left and our recruits stayed, it wouldn't even matter if Lincoln left. But since all these top recruits that had committed to Oklahoma are opting out, which there should be a rule against this. Whether it is once you commit, you're committed. It just shows, like, to me, it's a lack of character of these players of leaving at a time like this. And then when we're moving on to Brian Kelly, I get it. You're one of the most winning coaches, but you really haven't got over that hump. And so he's just looking for a different thing. I think he's a good coach. I think he's going to do well at LSU. And I think he thinks, you know what, I've tried at Notre Dame for so long.
Yeah.
I just need a new change of scenery.
He can't get the same type of athlete that you can get in the SEC into a Notre Dame academically. You know, Notre Dame's an academic school. It's just tough. And it came out of the blue. It really hit me. I didn't expect it at all. I figured he was a lifer. And Notre Dame was committed to him for the next 10, 15 years or whatever. Didn't he just sign a contract with them?
Yeah.
So, I mean, it just came out of the blue. But,
well, the crazy thing, how many LSU movies have you seen? Have you all seen Rudy? Notre Dame has their own movie. But the big thing with that is, the funny thing is he doesn't think he can win a national title. If some of these games go awry and certain teams lose, Notre Dame can make it into that top 4. And wouldn't it be ironic if Notre Dame wins the college championship as soon as Brian Kelly leaves?
That would be really something. That would be just crazy. And they brought in this 35-year-old new guy as a coach who has a lot of energy, African-American, and it should be interesting to see what he does and if he's got the team. It looks like he's got the team behind him. So
yeah, I haven't heard of one player hopping out of Notre Dame. Because you want to know why? They went there for the program, not the coach.
Absolutely. That's a great point.
And so, you know what? Much respect to all those players that stayed at Notre Dame regardless of the coach change.
Yep. Well, our rankings, we talk a little bit about that each week, and really what we're focusing on today is going to be 5 through 9, with Oregon losing last night, which we're going to talk about in just a moment. Really, you've got Oklahoma State at 5, Notre Dame 6, just as Seth was just saying. Wouldn't it be interesting if they got into the Final Four and then ended up getting on a roll and winning the national championship? That would really stick it to Brian Kelly. You've got Mississippi, Baylor at 8 and 9, respectfully. Of course, our 1 through 4 is UGA. Of course, is number 1. They're undefeated. They'll be facing Bama later on today. Michigan, number 2, after their big victory against Ohio State. They'll be playing against Iowa. And then, of course, Cincinnati is hanging on ever so gingerly at 4.
Well, this is how it goes. We'll get into the matchups here in a bit. But if Cincy were to somehow lose and Bama were to beat Georgia, you're not kicking Georgia out. Michigan, obviously, if they beat Iowa. OK State is already losing to Baylor. That is going to put Notre Dame in the top 4. So there's not a lot that has to happen.
Right.
I mean, there's some tough games ahead. Notre Dame does not get to play because they are, unfortunately, which has been like their thing, they're not in a conference, so they don't get a conference championship game, which sometimes helps, sometimes hurts. You don't have the risk of a loss, but you also don't get that big win at the end of the year, which could be crucial into hopping into the top 4.
And remember, Cincinnati beat Notre Dame earlier this year, so if Cincinnati is able to win today, there's always going to be that argument. If you beat a team, even if you aren't a Power 5 conference, does that team leapfrog you late in the year because of the strength of schedule situation, which is, of course, what's really hindering Cincinnati?
Well, and I mean, as much as Cincinnati's been successful this year, which we'll talk about their game later, Houston only has 1 loss. So they're both winning teams. And when did Houston's loss happen? Week 1.
Exactly.
We're a long way away from that Week 1 loss.
A long time ago, and it was Texas Tech that beat them. And let's also remember that Houston was up by 2 touchdowns in that game. So it wasn't like they weren't handling business. Texas Tech came back and ended up winning that game. Let's talk a little bit about yesterday's game, Oregon versus Utah. 10-2 Oregon comes in against a 9-3 Utah, who they just got crucified by. Utah crucified them twice. So the beginning of the game, of course, it was 7-0, and then all of a sudden Oregon throws a pick 6 and ends up being 14-0. At the end of the third quarter, it was 31-3, folks. 31-3. And I have to give my hats off to Houston or Utah. And Seth may have not gotten a chance to watch too much of Utah, but boy, they look good. I'm telling you, Kyle Whittingham had them just firing on all cylinders.
Let's make it clear. Oregon's not a bad team. Yes, these 2 losses look awful, losing by over 20 points in both of them. But sometimes, I mean, especially in college football, it just goes to the matchup. Utah's defense is stronger, faster. Their offense played on all cylinders. Oregon is still an explosive offense, but they can't keep up when somebody has a good defense. This is 2 times in a row that Utah's beaten them. I just think Utah has Oregon's number this year. Now, to be clear with that, I mean, they're both going to get bowl games at the end of this. This has no top 4 implications. But don't be surprised if Oregon blows out their bowl game and Utah wins theirs handily. I mean, these are 2 great teams, and I really think that this Utah, which I looked at their losses aren't the greatest. But, I mean, Oregon's 2 losses to Utah just proves that Utah is a force to reckon with, and they've gotten better as the year has gone on.
Utah has gotten better. Now, Utah is going to the Rose Bowl for the first time ever in program history.
Which means they're going to meet, I believe it's going to be Iowa or Michigan. It's whoever's in the Big Ten. I believe the Big Ten always gets the invite.
If one of those teams, if Michigan stays in the top 4, then it would be Iowa, because if they take the top playoff team from the Big Ten that plays in the Rose Bowl.
Yeah, and no offense to Iowa, Mike. I respect you. You got to the Big Ten championship. But watching this Utah team play, you are in a lot of trouble.
Yep.
And if it's Michigan, I think we're in for one of the greatest bowl games that's going to go on outside of the top 4.
I agree. We've got Baylor versus Oklahoma State. Again, that's happening right now. Baylor's number 9, Oklahoma State's number 5. Oklahoma State needs a defining victory here if they hope to jump over Cincinnati and get into the top 4. Oklahoma won the first matchup against Baylor, and Baylor has not really won a Big 12 championship since, I think it was RG3 days.
Yep, RG3, the man.
What have you got for this game?
So it's a tough rematch. Whenever you play a team twice, except in that Utah-Oregon game, it's usually hard to get 2 wins in a row. I mean, you're looking at an OK State team that just came off an emotional win. They beat Oklahoma, which I can't remember the last time that Oklahoma State actually won that rivalry. And then you have Baylor. Kind of no one really paying attention to you. You got a loss early to Oklahoma State, but they are a solid team. Oh, and they lost, I believe, to TCU by 2 points. So they dropped 2 games this year. But coming into this, I mean, it's all Oklahoma State has the pressure. Baylor's only playing for a bowl game.
Right.
Oklahoma State's playing to get in the top 4 for the first time since I can remember. So there is a lot of different pressure now. As much as people don't think that factors in, remember these are college kids.
Yep.
And from watching Baylor play against OU and then watching Oklahoma State, I just think Baylor's a little bit more athletic. They're a little bit quicker. And you know what? I'm going to switch it. I'm taking Baylor for this. I actually had Oklahoma State picked before this.
Of course, it helps that
Baylor's up right now.
7-3.
And so it's true. But the more I talk about it, I'm just thinking, Baylor's losses are very close.
Yep.
And Oklahoma State,
They may be experiencing a little bit of a hangover from the loss to OU because they haven't beaten them in so long.
Yeah, they finally get that win. They're all excited. They think everything's dandy. They're looking at a top 4, and they have one last game to play.
Yep. And let's remember that. That's because as we go in and we talk a little bit about the Michigan game, which we're going to talk about after the UGA Georgia-Alabama game. Now, this is the game of probably of the year so far. Number 1 Georgia versus number 3 Alabama. Interesting. There's a tight end called Brock Bauer who plays for Georgia. He's 6'7", and the guy can run like a deer. They did a little tracker on him last time he broke for a touchdown, and he was going 22 miles an hour. Folks, that's world-class sprinting when you can run 22 miles an hour. And it's even crazier that they can calculate that now, which is great. So look for a really tough game here. We've got tough defenses, and Alabama is an underdog, so this is a very rare situation. What do you think about this game, Todd?
I mean, everybody that watched the Auburn game, I want everyone to get that out of your mind. Auburn, every team that goes to take on the top dog prepares extensively. They change their game plans. They're tough to play, especially when it's a rivalry game. So even though Alabama only squeaked that out, I'm not looking too much into that. But looking into Georgia, hasn't been challenged a lot this year. They have been able to steamroll opponents. Alabama had a close game against Arkansas. Georgia crushed Arkansas by over 30 points. I just think Georgia this year is a world-class team. But
Their front seven too. You got to mention their front seven because they're just ridiculous.
But I am going to pick something against everything because I do factor in coaches. And how often have you ever heard Nick Saban not in the college football championship and he's playing for his life? So as much as Georgia, I believe, is the better team right now, I think Nick Saban pulls out every single stop and he squeaks out a victory in this. It will force a rematch, and you know what? I'm going to give the rematch to Georgia if it happens. But I think Bama comes out with their young quarterback that's probably going to win the Heisman. And I think Bama squeaks out a victory against this amazing Georgia team that doesn't give up a lot of points. They hit hard. They're fast on offense. But you know what? It's still Nick Saban at the end of the day.
Yeah, and it's tough. They both were on College game day this morning, and they're very, very gracious to one another. Kirby Smart was a big part of a lot of Saban's success. And it'll be interesting because traditionally speaking, Saban's assistants don't do very, very well against him.
They got one win, and it just happened.
Yeah, that was just this year. That was the first time it ever happened. All the assistant coaches and all those offensive coordinators that Saban's had over the years, only one has been able to beat him. One time. This brings us into the Michigan versus Iowa game. And again, I feel like Michigan, after getting such a huge win last week, let's look for the letdown. Is there going to be a letdown for Michigan? Is Michigan going to be able to come out with the same intensity they did against Ohio State? Or is Iowa going to step their game up and all of a sudden, even though they're a double-digit underdog, will they be able to sneak in and beat Michigan? This is my upset special. I'm going with Iowa.
Yeah, and I've been going back and forth on this because if you look back at the Nebraska game, which is really weird, you had a top team in Iowa playing a Nebraska team that only has 3 or 4 wins on the season. Vegas had Nebraska picked. And the weird thing about this game, and I didn't realize it till after the first quarter, Iowa sat their starter because he was a little banged up. Now they put him in to pull off the victory. And so the question will be is, how healthy is he? Is he healthy enough to take on a Michigan team that is rolling right now? If he is, I mean, if Iowa's defense can hold up, they're always good at running. They're doing really decent on the throwing game when this starter's in because they looked awful with the backup quarterback. But this starting quarterback has done a decent job. It's a long upset special. I mean,
it's going to be a big uphill battle.
I'm going to take Michigan just because, at some point, Michigan has to make it back to the top 4. They've always been knocking on the door these last couple of years. They haven't been able to get past Ohio State, so they've always fallen short. So you know what? I'm going to say it's finally time for Michigan to come back to the top 4 and that they're going to beat Iowa this week and go in the top 4. I don't know who they're replacing yet, but I feel with this win, I feel like this puts them in it.
Very good, very good. We have another interesting game for the ACC Championship. What's interesting most about this game is that Clemson's not playing for an ACC Championship. I mean, we've seen them in the game for the last at least 6, 7, 8, 10 years maybe?
Yeah, they've been solid.
So you've got Pitt versus Wake. You've got 2 different quarterbacks. You've got Pitt's quarterback, Pickett, which is a Heisman candidate, and you've got Wake's quarterback, who I happen to like very much, his last name, Hartman. And so we'll have to wait and see what happens and see which team actually shows up and which team wants it more. What do you think about this game, Seth?
So I think this is like a tale of 2 different teams. Pittsburgh's dropped the ball a couple times. I mean, they're still a great team. Like you said, their quarterback is up for the Heisman. The issue I have with Wake Forest, no matter what your record says, you're stumbling now. The losses have happened within the last 5 or 6 weeks here near the end of the season, which usually I can write off early losses because, your team's still young. Like Utah lost early.
Right.
But they're doing well now. This is the opposite for Wake Forest, and the issue that they have is their defense. As much as they're scoring 40, 50 points a game, they're still giving up 40, 50 points a game, and that's just not going to be a recipe for winning against a tough Pittsburgh team that's defense is going to be better than most of what Wake Forest has played.
I agree.
And so I'm going to give the edge to Pittsburgh, mostly because of the quarterback play, and I just think their defense is way better than Wake Forest. Don't be surprised if Kenny Pickett ends up throwing 5 touchdowns this game because everybody else has against Wake Forest.
Exactly. That's just going to help him more in the Heisman stand because we're looking at Alabama's quarterback as well, who's also very high on the Heisman list too. But no one has won it so far. And what can you remember a season where we've had this much of the Heisman Trophy just up in the air down to the stretch of moving into actually postseason?
Yeah, there's always been like 2 or 3 guys that never stumble, and you always wonder who wins the Heisman.
Mm-hmm.
But I remember watching College Game Day about 4 or 5 weeks ago, and they said this is the first year they've ever felt like nobody wants to win the Heisman this year.
No, there's no front runner. There's definitely no clear-cut favorites. So, Cincinnati versus Houston. Number 4, Cincinnati versus Houston. Houston is a sneaky good team. Again, we talked a little bit about it earlier. Their only loss was the first game of the season to Texas Tech. They're ranked 21st. They are hungry. So let's see if Cincinnati can do a convincing enough win to stay at number 4. And you know what? If I was betting this game, I would pick Houston to cover. It's a 10.5 point line on the game. So we'll have to see what happens. What have you got for this game?
So Cincinnati is, like, right now is sitting there. They understand a 3-point win puts them in jeopardy being kicked out of the top 4. You have to crush.
They got to cover.
So I'm seeing Cincinnati coming out firing. Their coach has got to be focused. He knows that there's no room for error. They've been criticized for their schedule. Technically, you're going to say Houston is a top 25 team because they just got in there.
Right.
And so this would be a top 25 win for them. So if they win it convincingly, I don't think you can justify kicking them out. Houston, on the other hand, it's really nice at this time of year. You're not playing for a top 4.
Right.
You're playing for a bowl game that you already qualified for. Now, losing, does it give you a worse bowl game? It's a bowl game nonetheless.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know what? I'm still taking Cincinnati, but don't be surprised if Houston, I mean, they have no pressure in this game.
Right.
If anything, you get to make ESPN for upsetting the undefeated Cincinnati. Worst case scenario, you're just another team that lost to Cincinnati, and you wait for your bowl game.
Right. Do you think since he's got the ability to cover the 10.5 points that they're talking about for the line?
It depends how they show up, because Cincinnati is notorious for being a terrible first half team. They, regardless if they're up, every game against unknown team, well, not unknown, but smaller teams, they're up by like a touchdown or 2. Now they end up winning by 21 or 30. I just don't know if you can do that against this Houston team. If it's close at halftime, you're probably going to fall a little short of that 10-point. If you're already up by 10 points, I see you winning by probably over 21. So it all depends how that first half goes.
Well, good. And this kind of concludes most of our regular season for the college. Of course, we're going to be covering bowl games, and we'll be here with you going forward. So don't worry about that. We'll have all your bowl coverage all the way through to the month of December. What I'd like to do now is just go in and we can talk a little bit about the NFL and some of the games from last week.
Yeah.
Basically, again, we want to encourage you to come down to Brothers. Today is a beautiful Saturday. The weather has been absolutely crazy. We are sitting on the deck here at Brothers Bar and Grill at the shops in Northfield. If you don't know where the shops of Northfield are, you know where Outdoor World is. Most people see that from I-70. We can see, I am staring at Outdoor World right now, and we're sitting on this great patio. Comfort food galore, great drink specials. Tell us what else you got going on as far as Brothers goes.
Yeah, right now we're hosting all the holiday parties. If you have a staffing event you want to book, we have a great upstairs mezzanine. Right now, all the sports are on. We got a big day today in college football. Mm-hmm. We also have some UFC fights tonight. We don't charge any cover, regardless if it's pay-per-view or not. And going into Sunday football, I mean, come show support for your team. You won't be an outcast. It's not all Broncos. We have probably one of the greatest diverse fan base in the NFL. You'll see Detroit fans, Chicago, Minnesota, people that aren't even close. For a while, we had Buccaneers before Tom Brady was there. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, come in. We'll put the game on for you. We'll cheer with you. Maybe cheer against you if you're playing the Vikings. But, it's going to be – it's just always a good time. The staff's super friendly. You feel like it's your second home.
It really is. It's almost like my second home. I'm here, and when I'm here, I love it. If I wasn't doing this radio show, I'd be here anyways, sitting at the bar and enjoying the games and talking to Seth. Last week, we had the Vikings versus the 49ers. And again, not to rub any more salt in poor Seth's wounds from last week, but he is hobbled. The Vikings ended up losing 34-26 to the 49ers. What happened?
So it's significant because it knocks us out of playoff contention. But the biggest issue is, I mean, we still have time to get back into it, but Mike Zimmer's supposed to be some defensive coach. But whose defense? Because there was no defense in that game. The Vikings went up early. I thought, wow, we're really going to rout the 49ers. And then all of a sudden, 49ers come back, and the Vikings have no response. So, you know what? The Vikings have some things to figure out. They need to start showing up every week, not every other week. They're lucky that they're still hanging in there because the NFL has been so weird this year that even the Broncos, sitting with a losing record, they're just over 500.
Just over 500.
They are still in the hunt for their division. So, I mean, the Vikings still have plenty of time. So we'll just hopefully they get it right this week.
Yeah, well, you know, and like Seth has said, this has been one of the very goofy years. Another great game to talk about is the Titans versus the Pats. The Pats just completely are firing on all cylinders right now at the most opportune time because they've got Buffalo this week. But they beat the Titans 36-13.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think about that game?
I mean, I think the Titans are just showing that they're not that good without Derrick Henry, to be honest. And I think the Patriots are showing Mac Jones is Bill Belichick's guy. I think that they're starting to click. They're finding some young players. Damian Harris is technically their lead back, but they have Rashad Stevenson as the backup, who's an Oklahoma boy that was amazing in college. He fumbled week 1, and Bill Belichick benched him for like 8 weeks. So, but he's back in the mix. So they're just finding weapons on all sides of the ball, and that defense is still playing really well. So I mean, this Patriots team is something that we need to watch because they might be back. It might have only been a 1 year off of the Patriots going to the playoffs.
Yeah, and we're going to be talking a little bit more about the Patriots because they're facing against their AFC East rivals, the Bills, in Buffalo today. The Bucs, Tampa Bay versus the Colts. Tom Brady just keeps chugging along with his team. 38-31, beat the Colts last week. What are your feelings on that game as far as Brady and Mike Evans and the boys down in Tampa?
Yeah, and I mean, people are probably going to look at the Colts and be like, oh, well, their record's not that good compared to Tampa. The Colts are a surging team. They were an amazing football team. Their defense has been playing great. Their weakest person on that team is Carson Wentz, and he's been playing pretty good. Mm-hmm. And so when you look at that, I mean, hats off to the Bucs. They had a tough loss to Washington a week or so ago, and they bounced back to take on a very tough Indianapolis Colts team. Antonio Brown out for the foreseeable next 3 weeks. He made a fake vaccine card. I don't know if it's allegedly or proven, but
it's proven.
So he is suspended for 3 weeks. But even without that, you're looking at Chris Godwin, Mike Evans. You still have Leonard Fournette. You have Gronk. They are so stacked on offense. Just watch them to hold in there, still win games, and when Antonio Brown comes back, they get even better. So this Bucs team is legit.
Yeah, and it just amazes me how they just seem to peak at the right time, just like last season. San Diego had a rough time coming here to Denver Broncos, the team that just won't quit, 6-5. Ended up pulling out a 28-13 victory over Herbert and the boys from San Diego, who were coming off a big victory over Pittsburgh. So I really got this one wrong. I didn't see Denver doing this well. And what are your feelings about Denver in last week's game?
I'm just shocked. I mean, to be honest, I thought the Chargers were going to steamroll them. I thought the Broncos, to me right now, they're an average team. Their defense shows up every once in a while. Their offense, they have young receivers that could be good. They're just not there yet. And the quarterback play is shoddy at best. I mean, you have Teddy Bridgewater, Drew Lock switching off and on because they can't figure out who's going to take the reins. But they put it together against the Chargers, a team that I predicted that would, if the Chiefs don't win the division, I thought for sure it would be the Chargers.
Exactly.
But I was just shocked. I mean, the Broncos played an amazing game. Hats off to you. You got a tough game this week, which we'll talk about later. But the Broncos are hanging in there a lot longer than I thought they would this year.
Yeah, the buzz around town is very positive, and who knows? Fangio may be buying himself another year or at least another season, because there was talk about getting rid of him and his coaching staff. Of course, it's his fourth season, which is critical for any coach. Yeah. The Steelers versus the Bengals. Oh my goodness. Okay.
This is your turn to feel it.
Yeah, exactly. My Steelers stink. They played horrible. The Bengals and Burrow, they did not move him off his spot, and he just lit them up. Granted, there's, and I'm not going to make excuses. I mean, we didn't have some of our defensive guys, but still, this is the first time since 1990 the Cincinnati Bengals have beaten the Steelers 3 consecutive times. 1990, folks. How old were you in 1990?
1990, I was 2.
2 years old. So look for the Steelers to try to regroup next week against the Ravens. We'll be talking about that in a little bit. What are your feelings on that game, Seth?
You know what? Like I said earlier, I believe I said last week, I mean, the Steelers are a team that have just played really ugly lately, and they finally played a team that exposed them that they need to tighten things up. I mean, you tied the Lions, and you haven't really blown out any team. Your offense has not clicked at all. Now, the defense, I mean, minus last week, I mean, it has been the bright spot to hold you in some games that has given you that chance. But overall, this Pittsburgh Steelers team needs to figure out. I know there's talks about moving on from Big Ben. I know that, like, Najee Harris is right now the focal point of this offense, but they're almost overrunning him where he's, like, in jeopardy of being hurt. So really hope that Pittsburgh can turn it around. They got another tough game this week. But, yeah, that was just all Cincinnati, showing that Cincinnati is back. Shows that they had a great draft with Jamar Chase, and then the previous year with Joe Burrow. They put together that tandem, and it has paid off.
LSU connection all the way. The Browns versus the Ravens. Browns just came up a little short. The Ravens win 16-10. Lamar Jackson, of course, is Seth is a big fan of. What were your impressions of last week's game? What happened with the Browns?
Honestly, I couldn't believe that the Ravens won on how bad Lamar Jackson played. He threw 4 interceptions, which is unheard of for Lamar Jackson. He really didn't get anything going this game, and Cleveland hung in there. I mean, when you play games that are interconference, they're always a little bit closer than you expect. It doesn't matter if they have 0 wins, 2 wins, 3 wins. It all comes down to that rivalry because people play with heightened emotion. They play with more intensity than they would have if they're playing a team outside of their conference.
Plus, they know them inside and out, backwards and forwards.
But, I mean, hats off to the Browns for hanging in there. I mean, the Browns have been struggling all year, so it wasn't a surprise to see the Ravens win. I think it was more surprising to see that the Ravens didn't win by more.
Right. And remember, we had 16 questionable people for the Ravens before the game, so that's hard to prepare to, as on the Browns. They didn't know who they'd actually be facing. Let's move on to this week, Seth, and let's go into right now, I think, one of the biggest games of the day. It's the Bills versus the Pats in Buffalo.
Yep.
Weather will be a factor in the passing game, and I will have to check and see, but definitely look, Buffalo is not the warmest place to play in December. What do you got for this game? What do you think?
So it all comes down to, I mean, the Patriots obviously found themselves in Mac Jones, but they're playing a tough Bills team that has the #1 rush defense. Now, they didn't show it a couple weeks ago when the Bills played the Colts because they got blown out when Jonathan Taylor ran and got 5 touchdowns. So it will be interesting to see if the Patriots can get a run game going against the Bills. If they do that, they can control the ball. And it also depends what Bills team is showing up to this game.
Exactly.
They lost to the Jaguars. Not many teams do that. And so the fact that they lost to the Jaguars and they got beat by the Colts, I just don't know what to expect here. I think the key X factor for the Bills this week is going to be, I believe his name's Dawson Knox. He's the tight end for the Bills. He's been out for a little bit, but he's athletic, he's young. Everyone's going to be watching Stephon Diggs. The Bills' run game it's okay, but it's not that great. But if they can hit Dawson Knox, get some room for Josh Allen to do some work, I think the Bills come ahead. But this Patriots defense has been really stepping up. They have Damian Harris and, like I said, Rashad Stevenson at running back. And, Mac Jones, he's no Tom Brady, but
he's accurate.
He's starting to look really good. And this is going to be the closest game. I don't know what the weather like is in Buffalo, but Buffalo's at home. Those fans are crazy. So I'm giving the edge to the Bills.
Oh, yeah. And I went to a Bills game in 1996, and it was 10 below zero, and if you opened your beer, your beer would freeze. And the stadium was full. So look for this to be a huge, raucous crowd in Western New York, and they hate the Patriots in Western New York. So this should be a really excellent test to see if the Patriots are for real.
Well, and the Patriots are going to be hungry too. This last year was the first time the Patriots didn't win their division in like 10 or 11 years.
Right.
And so the Patriots had a year off of being champion. And I was looking at some percentages that ESPN was posting. If the Patriots were to win this game, they go from a 30% chance to win the division to somewhere around like the 60 to 70 percentile of winning this division. So this game is just as crucial as a playoff game this week.
Yeah, I mean, remember, we're in week 13 of the season, so, you know, it's critical time right now. Broncos versus Chiefs with the events of last week, and the Broncos coming off such a big win against the Chargers. Kansas City, of course, is well rested. They were on a bye week last week. Have the Chiefs righted the ship? What do you think?
Chiefs are winning this division. They're ready. They're shooting on all cylinders. They don't even have their starting running back in Clyde Tolaire back yet. And the Broncos, as much as they pulled that upset over the Chargers, they're not going to keep up with the Chiefs. It's just, I went to the Chiefs game, it had to be a year or two ago. Mm-hmm. I was like, oh, I'm going to see Patrick Mahomes. He got injured. They had a quarterback they called off a couch the day before to be his backup. He played that game. The Broncos lost by 30 still. And that's when we were going through all the quarterbacks, but I just don't think the Broncos have what it takes to beat the Chiefs.
Yeah, I agree with you 100%. I think the Chiefs have righted the ship, and you're going to see the Broncos really kind of exposed for the team that they are, the 6-5 that they are. Ravens versus Steelers. Again, I don't know which Steelers team is going to show up. The Ravens, again, are coming off that victory last week against the Browns. Lamar Jackson looks good. One thing good is that T.J. Watt will be playing for the Steelers this week, even though he was on COVID protocol, and that's huge because if we don't get pressure on Lamar Jackson, it could be all over for us. The Steelers are the 5th worst run defense in the NFL. So look for Lamar Jackson to do his thing, but also look for some running backs for the Ravens to have big days today.
Yeah, and so when it comes down to this game, the Ravens obviously are playing great this year. Lamar Jackson's playing out of his mind. But the big thing here is they might have found their guy to be the running back. Because remember, ever since the start of the season, J.K. Dobbins, he's been out all year. That was supposed to be their guy. He was playing great last year. He's out for the year. So they've been doing this kind of carousel at running back. But right now, Devontae Freeman, it sounds like he is going to start taking a bigger role. And when I watched last week's game, even though it was closer, Lamar Jackson played back, Devontae Freeman is still explosive. Remember, he was the starter in Atlanta. He was their guy. He was amazing. And I just think right now, who are you going to cover? If he does a fake handoff and Lamar runs and you're watching Devontae Freeman, or if he gives it to Freeman, because the great thing about Lamar Jackson is you never know when he's going to take it. And on top of that, with those great wide receivers, if Hollywood can actually catch a ball, and then you also have, what's his name? Mark Andrews at tight end.
Right.
You have just a solid offense here. So if it turns into a race, there's no way Pittsburgh holds up. Now, if Pittsburgh can actually hold Lamar in check, like make Lamar Jackson throw 4 picks, which I highly doubt, then they got a shot. But I'm going the Ravens all the way this week.
Yeah, unfortunately, I'm going to have to go with the Ravens as well, go against my Steelers. Bengals are going to get the Chargers this week. The Bengals are 7-4. Okay, it's a huge season for Cincinnati fans. My brother is a huge Bengals fan. They haven't won a playoff game since 1990, so they are psyched, and it's going to be interesting to see Burrow versus Herbert, 2 young quarterbacks that came out in the draft the same year, right?
Mm-hmm.
They did. They came out together. And, of course, Burrow was the number 1 pick that year. Bengals favored for a big win. We'll have to see what happens. And what are your feelings on this game?
So this one is really hard to pick. I'm going to go with the Bengals, but it's going to be a close game at the end. I mean, the Chargers are coming off a great performance against the Steelers team and then kind of laying an egg against the Broncos. So I look for them to right the ship this week. But this Bengals team is overperforming more than we could ever predict. Now, they're a great team. Joe Mixon is healthy. First time I've ever seen that. You have Jamar Chase, rookie year, probably looking at rookie of the year. And then Joe Burrow, just with the chemistry he has with Jamar Chase, their offense is amazing. And the defense has stepped up more than I can remember for the Cincinnati Bengals team. I have not once, probably in my lifetime, ever been like, man, you got to watch out for those Bengals. but this team is just here to stay, and I think that they beat the Chargers, but I think it's going to be closer than everyone thinks. I could see this being separated by a field goal, maybe a touchdown, but I'm going to go with just the field goal gap this week.
Yeah, just a little history. The Bengals, last time they had a team this good was 2005 season, and of course they ended up losing their quarterback in the first divisional race against the Steelers. He ended up getting hurt in the first series of the game, and the Bengals really have been almost irrelevant since 2005. Mm-hmm. And of course, you remember in 1988 when they played against John Montana, and he took him down and beat him in the Super Bowl. So the Bengals have been basically the Cubs of the NFL for the last 30 years.
I was born that year.
The next game is, again, the 49ers versus the Seahawks. The Seahawks are out of the playoffs. They're 3-8. Russell Wilson, we've talked about him, and being hurt, injured. But, again, Seattle is playing really, with no pressure or anything else. You've got the 49ers 6-5. What do you think? Do you think the 49ers have enough to be able to get through the Seahawks, or do the Seahawks come out of the blue and play an upset special or spoiler here?
49ers have enough to win this game. The question is where's the mentality of Seattle at? Are you shutting down for the season? Because even with all the NFL teams getting losses this year, it would take a miracle. You'd have to win out almost from here to actually be relevant for playoffs, and hope that a lot of teams lose on the way. 49ers in a wild card spot. Mm-hmm. They're still fighting to move up. Debo Samuel, just an amazing player. He's this X factor that can play running back. He can play wide receiver. He's super fast. I'm not too sold on the quarterback situation in 49ers. Jimmy Garoppolo has looked good at times, but he also kind of is their Achilles heel. If he plays bad, they're done for. Now, we're looking at Russell Wilson on getting that early hand injury. Mm-hmm. And, he hasn't looked like himself. But as time goes on, we all know he's going to get back there. Is this the week he shows up? He sells DK Metcalf, Tyler Lockett. They're going with Alex Collins, not the strongest running back because Chris Carson is out for the season. You know what? I'm going to go upset special. Let's go Seattle over the San Francisco 49ers. This isn't me being bitter about the Vikings loss. I just feel like the Seahawks, they're due. They're going to win. They're not a bad team. They're always usually a playoff contender. They had some bad injuries this year. And now they're playing for pride, and I think they're going to get this win for Pete Carroll.
Very good, very good. And our last featured game this week is going to be the Cardinals versus the Bears. The Bears, Andy Dalton, his quarterback, Fields, broke his 2 ribs and will be out. He's their young quarterback that came out of Ohio State. The Red Rocket, Andy Dalton, will he be able to lead the Bears at 4-7 versus the 9-2 Cardinals? And the other question is Kyler Murray going to play? Is he going to play? Now, we know Khalil Mack is out for the Bears defense, so that hurts them. But what about Kyler Murray? What are your feelings on that?
So here's the big thing. Cardinals have already gone 2-1 with Colt McCoy, which I think they very well could win this. But the big question is how bad is this beating? If Colt McCoy plays, all of a sudden it's going to be a little bit closer for the Bears. But if Kyler Murray comes back, not only could he come back, DeAndre Hopkins could come back. And if they both come back, they will destroy this Bears team by 21 points, if not more. The big thing is the Bears are coming off, I would say it's a big win, but it was just against the Lions. But they came off a win to save their coach's job. Mm-hmm. Now, he's living on borrowed time. Regardless what he does this season, unless he were to get into the playoffs, he's done for the year. He'll have to go somewhere else after this. But this Cardinals team, which their coach, what's his name, Clinsbury? Mm-hmm. He was actually linked. OU tried to get him for a coach to replace Lincoln Riley, but he turned it down. But this coach has done an amazing thing in Arizona. They are now 8-2. I don't see anyone really stopping them. I think that they pretty much are going to win the rest of the way. This team is explosive. They're good on defense and offense. The addition of Zach Ertz not too long ago from Philly has only improved their offense. And James Conner has really picked up that running back game since Chase Edmonds went down. It was a 1-2 punch. Now it's just a 1 punch. But that 1 punch is really getting yards, scoring touchdowns. So I'm giving this to ex-Steeler. Yep, he should have been your guy. But Najee Harris is doing a great job there.
Exactly.
But, I just don't see the Bears doing anything, especially without Khalil Mack.
Right.
That's just tough. You lose the leader on that defense. I just don't see a way the Bears can win this game. And I've been proven wrong before, but Arizona all the way.
Very good, very good. Well, we want to thank you guys for tuning in. We got some metrics data back in, and we are trending up. So we want to thank you for tuning in. Share it with your friends. Again, we're pretty new here doing this. This is our first year, our first season, and it's coming kind of winding down. But the podcast is growing, and the Apple format, we want to thank for that, the Apple platform. We want to also remind you to come down to Brothers Bar and Grill. That's where we are right now. We're sitting on the patio. You can see the beautiful blue sky behind us. There's ski lift chairs that you can sit in out here that makes it really kind of personable. And the food. I cannot tell you how great the food is. All the sauces are made in-house daily. Mm-hmm. Comfort food, gator balls, and plenty of TVs. How many TVs are here, Seth?
So we have a total of 36 inside, and we have a total of 10 on the outside patio. So if it's a nice sunny day or if it's a nice warm night, we also have a very nice fire pit you can sit around, and it's kind of like you're almost in the surround sound of TVs, because when you look at the fire, you have 3 TVs pointed at you, so you can watch multiple games at once.
And the sound is excellent out here on the patio.
Yeah. It's so good we have to mute it, because otherwise you won't be able to hear it.
And definitely come down, and just as like Seth was saying, there's not many places where you can go see UFC fights, even the paid ones with no cover.
Yeah.
Absolutely no cover. So come on in and check us out. We'll be here all day. Seth is the general manager. You'll see him behind the bar. Just say hello to him, and any TV that you may want to watch or any game that you may be, we're going to be get it close enough to you that you'll be able to see at least a portion of it.
Yeah.
Seth, anything else? Any closing thoughts that you have?
No, I think we're in for a great week of football. I can't wait for the recap next week, because it's going to be interesting to see how all these games play out, and we get to see how right we are or how wrong we are.
Absolutely.
So it's always fun, especially with those college games.
Exactly. Well, thank you very much. And again, share us, the Dr. Jimbo Love Show, with your friends. And, don't be afraid to upload or download our podcast and send it and share it with your friends. We really appreciate the support that we've been receiving. And come down and see us at Brothers. Thank you very much. Have a great week, and get out there and earn it.